Well, today is September the 11th, and 20-some years ago, terrorists attacked the Twin Towers in New York. They also are going to, or trying to attack the capital of this great nation called the United States of America. And I wonder, where were you on that day? Do you remember? Were you born? You know, I was on a job site when that happened. And I was sitting in my office and I got this call from my wife who said that, Ray, there's a building out in New York that is burning. Airplane hit it. She said it's on the national news right now. If you want to turn your TV on, you'll be able to see it. So I reached over and turned the TV on, which is kind of a rarity. Once in a while I should turn it on at noon to see the news. But as soon as I seen what happened, I went over to the office next to me and I asked a friend of mine, I said, "You want to come over? There's an attack on a high-rise up in New York. A plane hit it." Actually, I didn't say attack, I just said a plane had hit a building up there in New York. Then you could see the smoke billowing out. And at the time I thought, well, this could be an accident. Of course, there's lots of commentary going on. But then this next plane came, and they had the cameras on it, and headed straight for that building next to it. The buildings up there were called the Twin Towers. And when that airplane hit that building, I thought we were at war. It's not the first time somebody tried to take a building down in New York. And I never dreamed that a building like that would come down as easily as it did. I've worked on buildings like that, putting steel together. I always thought those buildings were indestructible in my mind. But when I saw what happened in that first building that got hit, collapsed on itself to the inside and come down, it was an unbelievable moment of realization of how many people probably died in that collapse. But knowing what had happened worries you. Because you never know if your nation is prepared to protect your nation, and when you see two buildings come down so easily, because when the second one came down, it further made the realization come to me that there isn't anything safe in this world. If an airplane, an airliner, can crash into a building like that so easily and bring the building down with so many people in there, what in our country is safe? The one thing, the aftermath of this, immediately people were mad out on the street. And they wanted blood. It's a day that I'll always remember, but as generations grow up, we forget the vulnerability of our nation when we let things slide. Other nations have terrorist groups, and we've been lucky that We really haven't been touched too much by these terrorist groups, but it goes on a regular basis. We have troops overseas, and a lot of times we think we're going to pick up on all the what's going on, but there is so much for threats and things like that that a lot of the threats are taken extremely lightly because they don't ever happen. They don't come, but they're out. The plans that are coming up. That was one of the blackest days our nation has faced since Pearl Harbor at the beginning of World War II. It caused us to go into that war. Today, when I reflect back on that and I look at what is the preparedness of our nation should somebody attack our infrastructure, the few nuclear plants that are running? What about our petroleum distillate plants? Presently, we only have enough oil in our reserves for 18 days. So what would you do in the next 18 days, count them all, to be without oil? You know we're still dependent on oil, I hope you understand that. We brought 38% of our reserves down to stabilize the prices of our gasoline and diesel within our own country so that the high prices wouldn't cause such a big inflation. And it helped to do that. But we haven't replaced what we took out. We had some reserves on our natural gas that was sent to Europe to replace some of those that were destroyed when Ukraine and Russia started their fight over there, and one of the main pipelines was destroyed. Our world is dependent on things like that, and I worry about it, and 9/11 brought it into focus. And a lot of you out there, I know you don't think about it on a regular basis, and we try not to because it hurts the heart to think about the thousands of people that die in situations like that, and we're not the only ones that suffer like that. Right now we have two major things going on in other countries, and those people, you can imagine how they feel when so many of their people are suffering and dying on a regular basis. But are we prepared? Can we defend this country? This next war will be fought, whether it's nuclear rockets or if it's some of these huge bombs that can do this devastation that a nuclear bomb does, but has less of a problem aftermath. A nuclear bomb causes is radiation problems after the bomb is exploded. But these other bombs are just as powerful and have the same effect of destruction. And a few of them in New York City would wipe out the entire thing. It would be obliterated. And that could so easily happen. And we have small countries out there that are now gaining the capabilities of it. Iran is one of them. Korea is one. China. And Russia. Russia's had those capabilities since the 50s. Early 50s. And that's kind of how the Cold War started, was the United States and Russia worried about the power of the two most powerful countries in the world at the time. And now we share that power with others that have grown into that capabilities that we had back then. At that time, because we were the biggest guys on the block, we weren't as apt to get touched. But we didn't do well when we helped out the Civil War in Korea or Vietnam. And we got spanked different times in Afghanistan. Although we were able to keep them somewhat safe. There were skirmishes on a regular basis over that 20 years. And before we could even get out of there with our troops, we were being attacked and lost 13 of our soldiers over there on the way out, on the last days of evacuation. When we left, I heard last night it was somewhere around 1,000 U.S. citizens in that country as the last plane pulled out. Now, I don't know what they thought, because we were promised twice on national TV by the President of our United States that he would not leave one person behind, not one citizen. Sometimes our politicians, to please us, will make promises that are unreal and can't be followed to try to make us happy, to try to keep the strain or stress from hitting home. But it's also the rhetoric is designed to keep them in office at the same time. A weak nation cannot stand. Up until 3.5 years ago, we had enough fossil fuels that we weren't dependent on other countries. And within 6 months of the new administration, we were buying 12 to 14% of our oil off from other nations, and one of them was from, the biggest share was from Russia. So we were buying from Russia oil, and we were supplying Ukraine with financial help and weapons. Two people at war. And we could have used the power that we had at the time probably to have slowed it down or stopped it. We held those two nations in our hands financially with our trade agreements and the power of supply for both countries. Today, the world is more involved than it ever was, and we are not necessarily the big boys on the block anymore, but we are the ones that are spending the most money in helping out. I'm hoping that we haven't dipped so far that we can't survive an attack or whatever happens. But keeping in mind what happened on 9/11 over 20 years ago, I think it was about 23 years ago, 24, 23, 2001. It worries me. Our borders have been inundated with people from all the countries of the world. And some of them may not be so nice as we would like to think. And it doesn't take many terrorists within the boundaries of our borders to cause a major problem. In a very short period of time, the water supply is going to be poisoned to the extent now never to be used again. Our lands, the same thing can happen. Most people here haven't seen what happens or what other countries go to up front. They only can hear about what's you're fed on the media. But those that live in those areas, like over in the Arab countries, they've been at war for thousands of years. They grow up with it. We've been lucky here. Our shores have been very lucky that we haven't had a major force come in and walk across this country and destroy parts of it and kill our citizens. But while we have all these thoughts about what happened in 2001 on September 11th, I want you to think about our future as well as what you did about our history. In that moment, when those buildings come down, our nation become together like brother and sister, families, neighbors, states. They all come together for a common cause, and that was to defend our country and do whatever is necessary to bring back that feeling of peace within the borders of our country. And yet we've opened up our borders wide open to where It is no longer safe from invasions. It's not strong enough to keep back waves of people coming across our border. I don't even know if our Gulf is safe. I hope that our leaders of our country are trying to look in the future to make sure our country is going to be safe and is going to go on. I'm not trying to scare you on here. I'm just trying to get you to think of what it takes to maintain this great nation that we love so much. I hope the young people of our nation, even though a lot of them weren't born during that attack on New York City, I hope that as they see people out there today, some of the older people that were around, listen to some of that talk of how many people were affected. The entire city of New York woke up and immediately, in minutes, they come out fighting mad. A lot of that is all gone now. A lot of people have forgotten it. A lot of people haven't heard much about it. And let's face it, some don't care. There were some nations that celebrated when those buildings came down. They were as happy as we were mad. One of our biggest one of the people or one of the countries that hate us the most, I would say, is probably Iran. And I remember it's not so long ago that we had, I think, over 400 citizens that were arrested or detained over there for about a year, I think, or maybe a little over a year. Maybe it was 400 days, whatever it was, that these people were there. There was an election that took place back then. And the day before the new president took office, they released every one of those prisoners. That country attacked one of our naval ships with mines that were in the water. And within 8 hours, we crippled their navy so that they could not fight back anymore. 8 hours. And they left us alone for all these years. And now they attack us on a daily basis through their proxies. I hope you keep that in mind, because the buildings come down because of plans that were made over there and brought to our country. Let's choose cautiously what we plan on doing and use our common sense that tells us, don't ever trust a bear, it might bite you. They can be friendly looking, but believe me, they're not friendly. You stick your hand out, they will bite the hand that feeds you. And that's what's happening over there. The more money we spend over there, the more chance we have of being bitten. That's my opinion. I've lived long enough to see things like that in the past, and it worries me about the future. Regardless of how many years or months or weeks or however it is that I've got left, I realize that this country, at any time, could have things like that happen to it again. Could happen this afternoon or tomorrow, any day. Well, I don't know where you're at right today and how many of you are willing to listen to this little thing. I'm just giving you the experience that I lived through back then. I have been to other countries and seen how the cultural differences make a difference in how they feel. It's scary sometimes. With that, I hope the Lord blesses you, and I'll pray for our country and pray for those today that are embroiled in battles and losing citizenry around the world. I would like to see peace. I wish it was peace that could last forever. It's a waste of time for countries to have to fight like this. But you know something? I understand the world, because even in a small town, we can end up with a battle where half the people fight the other half. It's a shame. Where with a two-party system like this country has, and I realize there's a lot of small parties besides that, but they can't get along well enough for them to do the duty that we vote them in and hire them to do for us. For some reason, the pendulum has swung, and now we're working for them, not the reverse. We're working for them. And they don't mind letting us know what they expect out of us, instead of us expecting them to do for us. And yet it's our own vote that puts them in there. Goodbye. God bless.